back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the second hour of the show. This hour, we're going to be speaking with Jason Gregory about his book, The Way of the Weirdo. Not that I know anybody that's weird, but we're going to find out. Don't forget, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by SoulHealer.com and the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's AppliedEnergeticsInstitute.com. And as always, you can find the archives for the shows at www.justenergyradio.com. You can also sign up for our weekly newsletter to keep you informed of the programming that we have coming up. Let me tell you a little bit about Jason and get him on the air, and we can find out all about this weirdo stuff. Jason Gregory, for years, has been a researcher in the field of suppressed history, esoteric knowledge, and the origins of humanity. Growing up his whole life within the comforts of the West, he chose to live a more humble existence in the land of Asia. Jason's life in the East naturally moved him into the exploration of consciousness and the world within. In his journey, he was profoundly influenced by the philosophies of Vedanta, Buddhism, Hermeticism, and the Way of the Tao. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, the author of The Way of the Weirdo, Jason Gregory. Hey, Jason, how are you doing?
I'm great, Rita. Thanks for having us on. It's a pleasure.
So how are things in the land down under?
Well, it's wet. It's raining, and the weather's a little bit crazy these days down here.
It's a little bit crazy here, too. I mean, it's winter for us, and we've had, over the weekend we had 70-degree weather, which is not normal. Not that I'm going to complain for 70-degree weather, but it's still not normal.
Well, it's summer down here, and we've had snow in the mountains, so a little bit strange.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you can keep all the bad weather down there. We'll just take the sunshine. So we're going to be talking about your book, The Way of the Weirdo. But weirdo? What do you mean by that?
Well, it can have a few meanings for the individual, each individual, I suppose. On the surface, it means basically someone who is strange to their environment, someone who just seems they don't fit in the normal spectrum of society and the mechanics of the way this world works. I've always felt like I was an outsider. I don't know about yourself, Rita, but I always had an open mind, and I was open to new ideas, new suggestions, and also once you get into the exploration of your own consciousness, you really do become an imaginal cell within this environment, you can say. And there's a couple of other meanings to the word weird. You could take the Nordic view, where you have word, which actually means someone who delves into the mystery of life. So it's an old Druidic word where someone will delve into the mystery of consciousness, which is what we've sort of walked away from, and especially the Western model of the world. We don't delve into the realm of consciousness anymore. So basically, in a nutshell, that's what weirdo means. And it just means, like I said throughout the whole book, it's trying to embrace your own weirdness, not push that to the side. Try and understand more about, why you don't. Sometimes some people feel like they need to fit in this society, and I don't believe that you need to attempt to try and fit into something that is, it's fundamentally sick in a sense, society.
Why did you decide to write about this? I guess you're a self-proclaimed weirdo.
I suppose so. Look, when I was traveling, I met plenty of weirdos. I met many beautiful people who they embraced life, and they themselves were seeking. They themselves were exploring themselves, exploring the earth, and just having a great time in the process of doing it as well. And I just thought for me, it was such a beautiful experience, because even though I shattered a lot of my false illusions, I began to embrace a lot of darker traits of my own personality and shine light into that darkness. So moving forward, I basically for 5 years before that, I've been predominantly a conspiracy researcher. So I always delved into the world of who was behind 9/11, secret societies, global corruption, and all that goes on top of that. So from there, I sort of integrated all of that into my own experiences and my own understandings of consciousness. So for some reason, I felt compelled to almost write what I believe is, in a sense, a manual for sometimes, even though some people, you can read it on a deeper level, but I try to language it so it can reach the layman in the street. And I've even had a lot of comments said that, we need to get this book into the high schools, we need to have 16-year-olds reading this book. And, for me, that's a great idea, but maybe the educational system won't agree with that.
So what makes one person a weirdo when someone isn't?
Well, I suppose just not... I suppose the weirdo just doesn't accept the world for what it is. Especially the media's version of the world. Like we are fed nonsense, basically. Like, even the average person in the street, when you speak to them about television and media, unconsciously they know that it's prefabricated. It's not... The news does lie. They even admit it. The average person on the street will admit it. But still they go home at 6 o'clock or whatever time the news is showing, and, they download their programs. So I suppose the difference is the weirdo acknowledges that the world is... there's something not right, and for some reason they don't fit in it, and they feel that there is something behind this, that we aren't really slaves. We're not supposed to be slaves to something, especially to the materialistic world. Whereas the average person will sort of, they have a disassociation with the world, but they continue to accept and ignore that side of reality without embracing it. Once again, not shining the light into darkness. But I suppose that's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, I think your definition is just really interesting, because I guess, just based on the word, I would have a much broader definition of that word, even though I agree with what you're saying, that people that tend to be, and I'm going to use the word explorers, often are looked at from the non-explorers as being weirdos. But then there are people that aren't really explorers that are weirdos too, in their own weirdo way, if you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. Look, for me, it was just the way, it's just sort of the context I put it in the book. Like, I totally agree with you there, Rita. There is many ways you can see weirdo, but that's the sort of context I put it in there. And there are deeper levels for people who can see probably the deeper essence of it, and there's other people who will see the surface. And I acknowledge that. And, I really just love the word weird as well, because it's just, I've always loved that word since I was a child. So, and I hope people embrace that I suppose that strange side of their personality and delve more into that.
Do you think people own their weirdness, or do they just try to shy away or cover up the fact that they really are weird?
I feel that they, in a sense, majority of people, they do try to cover it up, because they will see that within themselves they are attracted to stuff that is not, in the logical sense, accepted by society. So they may be attracted to things like the UFO phenomenon, or, conspiracies in the world, or just not fitting in the world. They might even be attracted to living sustainable on the planet, etc. Some people do entertain that for a certain amount of time, but they do block off their weirdness. You're correct. They consciously do it for, whatever reason. Most of the time it is to try and fit back into the main accepted view of reality. So, and we see that a lot. We see a lot of researchers, they talk about that as the sheep pen mentality, where someone tries to break free, but you get the rest of the sheep pen, calling the other person back in, like, don't elevate to any sort of level. Stay, with the masses, and we'll do the same thing day in, day out. So I see why people do it. So it's really a psychological problem. It's not It's not something on onus. It's not something that we totally should blame on society. It still comes back to the individual.
Don't you think that there's a lot of pressure in society for people to conform? You know, the whole "you're going to burn in hell if you read that book" kind of thing.
Definitely, yeah. That's the people who run society don't have material like you or I. That sort of material is not to their best interest, because it's enticing people to explore the nature of consciousness, the nature of this existence, whereas society and those who are behind society, they perpetuate people to stay attached to their ego and their identity in a profoundly sick society. So there's too much pressure in a sense to leave for a lot of people, because we are sold the American dream. I know that's not just associated with United States. That's even in Australia and the UK. People use that term, the American dream, getting the mortgage, having the nice car, having the family, and that's only the accepted view. So in a sense, when that sort of parameters come into play, I see a lot of the pressures, especially on couples, etc., to fit that mold for society.
And to me, it just seems like a very uncomfortable place to be. I mean, I've always lived on the fringe. You know, I mean, I'm a psychic. You know, boom. Yeah, that just automatically puts you out there. Even though
Definitely.
I don't think I'm weird, but I won't give you any of my friends' phone numbers because I already know what they'll say. Is there some kind of impact if you block your weirdness, you know, either personal or social, from just kind of putting those blinders on and keeping yourself from, I'm going to say, being in the flow of that information and energy?
Definitely. I think there's a psychological decay takes place. I know people don't see it, but what you see, all you have to do is be an observer of reality and have a look at individuals who have lived their whole life ignoring that flow of energy. And when you see them at the age of 60 or 70 or 80, you can look at the human organism and you can see a human organism that just looks like it's been under stress for a long time. It's been blocked from that energy. So I believe there's actually a psychological decay there of not accepting what that flow is and embracing it, because as we know, the name of your radio show, Just Energy, so it's following that energy, it's following that the Tao, so to speak, and getting into that river. But people, it's again, the deeper understandings of reality are not readily available for everybody. So I can acknowledge why people do ignore it, but that it does have a detrimental psychological effect on the individual.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So what happens to someone that chooses to open themselves up to these new thoughts or new ideas? Is there some kind of a process that they can do? Does it just sort of happen to you?
Again, I'm not sure. It's almost like I can only judge from my own experience, Rita, but it's almost like, in a way, the energy of this information comes forward in a very strange manner, and then if you continue to follow that process, then you'll just continue to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into whatever certain realm you're being pulled into. There is an energetic signature behind why the energy is there. That's sort of the process of your own consciousness unfolding. If you've sort of let it be susceptible to alternative information, then you'll naturally, as your consciousness unfolds, there will be energetic signatures within the environment that are the physical representations of your unfoldment. So, in a way, you are almost being, if you're open to it, you will be, people say led or guided. These are just reference words. I suppose they're not bad, but you are guided towards that information. some people say that they feel like they're, chosen in a sense. Look, I'm not here to say that it's right or wrong, but I don't like to think that, in a sense, that there is someone else choosing it for you, even though I feel there's a little hint of truth to it. But there's something within the soul nature of an individual that is compelled and guided, in a sense, to that. And then once they're in that river, they continue to flow. While the average individual who blocks it off will continue to block it off, and there'll just be synchronicities will continue to happen in their life, but they will be passed off as mere coincidences.
And see, and I believe that if the universe or spirit wants you to get a message, it will just keep getting louder and louder and louder until you kind of have no choice but to listen to its call or die. One or the other,
Exactly. And I've done it. I've ignored some calls I've had in my life, and then they've been like beating drums in my head. So there's a point where, you just can't ignore it.
That's really cool. So when we're talking about opening ourselves up to these new thoughts and new ideas, are we talking about any specific area or modality, or is it just kind of opening yourself up to new and different?
Yeah, just new and different, I suppose. There's no sort of mode of thinking. There's to opening yourself up to, the infinite realm. There's no real mode of thinking or anything behind it. That's, in a sense, why it is infinite. There's just infinite amount of rabbit holes that you can sort of fall down, and you can be guided in your own particular way. Once again, people are, we all are one, but we're not, in a sense, the same. We all are one, but there is the duality of life. So everyone, when you can step back and not get caught in the detail of life, and you can see the whole picture, you can see the collective consciousness unfolding, and everyone's playing their own particular part. But the problem with a lot of people who are thrust into the area of the infinite realms is they themselves still get caught in the detail, and they are caught in opinions and their own bias towards, maybe say if they were into the realm of, 9/11 was an inside job, they either go really deep into that and they are bound by their own judgments. Whereas when you really truly explore your own consciousness, you sort of, in a sense, you don't take life too seriously, but you know that in a sense, your opinions are only your opinions, and it's not for everyone else's eyes to see. You can throw your own opinion in a humble way, and if it resonates with other people, then it does. But if you're going in with all guns blazing, then this can be it can be a double-edged sword, because you will get there's no respect that comes from that from the other individuals in society. So there's in a sense, it's to step into those infinite realms. There's no mode of thinking. There's just opening the senses up. But as you sort of continue to delve into that area, if you aren't blocked by your own opinions, if you aren't blocked by your own judgments, then the more natural and subtle energetic emotions will become part of your life, as in compassion and forgiveness. And that'll be your mode of, not your mode, but that'll become your internal engine. It'll be compassion and forgiveness at the forefront of your life, and always seeing the other individual for who they are, even if they may not be on the level you are, but always trying to see that spark within them.
It's something that you said just a little bit ago about, someone who is interested in the 9/11 conspiracy theory, and they delve into it and come up with some kind of conclusion, and then based on their conclusion, they have a belief that their opinion is the only opinion. By doing something like that and not being, I'm going to say, open to other potentially prevailing wisdom, aren't they blocking themselves as well, even though they might already be a weirdo, but to this flow of energy?
Definitely. And I was actively in like the 9/11 Truth movement many years ago, and I saw exactly what you said, Rita. The cutting off of the primal energy was just becomes, you can see it becoming non-existent in a lot of the individuals. It begins to blossom, as they delve into that spectrum, but then they are bound by their own opinions and their own judgments in that realm. So, if they're not, for myself personally, like when I was in that realm, other things just opened themselves up to me, and I just kept following, and then it led me to other areas. And so, for those people who are sort of stuck in their own doctrine or in their own beliefs on any topic, examine yourself. Why is that the case? Are you seriously the arbiter of all truth, or is it just a process you are going through in your own conscious unfoldment? And we see it in a lot of movements today, and we see it in the 9/11 Truth movement, etc. That people have come to this conclusion that they believe they know the official story, when in truth, who really knows what happened that day? Seriously, we've all got our opinions, but can you really point the finger? Do we really know fundamentally who was behind it? And the answer is no, none of us do. Only those.
Don't.
No, well, we don't.
There are other people that do, but we don't.
No, the mass majority don't know. The ones who were and who were in the circles of in that time, they know. So, yeah, exactly. But we don't.
Look back, because I have to tell you, it's like you definitely took me by surprise when you started getting into some of the conspiracy theory stuff. But I want to come back to that a little bit later on after we kind of finish talking about this weirdo part. If someone were interested in stock tradings or real estate or dog grooming or I don't know, any of these topics, would that also start putting them on this path? If it's something that they started investigating and exploring because they're being led that way, are we still talking about the same thing? I mean, because pretty much we kind of talked about kind of metaphysical conspiracy things, but does it have to be one of those things, or can it be pretty much anything that's out there?
It can be anything that's out there. Like you said, you mentioned someone in Wall Street or someone like that. They can be naturally led in that direction. There's no doubt about it, and they can. You could say some of those people can still continue to live that existence, but fully embrace that weirdo aspect of themselves. I've met one of my good friends from England who I met in India, and he was heavily into the stock market and a very wealthy guy, and then he's off in ashrams and etc. So he had that whole paradigm about himself, that whole other side of his life that he was embracing, but he still had that other aspect of his life where he was in the social structure and playing his role in society, you could say. So it's not bound to. We've got to remember that sort of getting into that energetic flow is something that it's eternal. So it's not bound by any aspect of reality that we live in. It's embraced by all of it. So it's just those who sort of embody it from wherever they stand in this environment. I've heard people tell me that they know people who make napalm bombs that are fully conscious. Now, I don't know about that, truthfully, but who's to say that they aren't fully conscious people? I can't say, but that we do have that whole aspect about humanity at the moment.
Well, I mean, and this is probably going to sound awful here, but, there's somebody like Adolf Hitler, where everybody demonizes him, but what was going on in his head, and what was his motivation for doing what he did in the first place? Because there could have been, originally at least, good motivation for, unifying the country and the acts that he took. Could have been. We don't know.
Well, we don't know. Yeah, we don't know. We just have the media's version of Adolf Hitler. We don't really know what his motivation was personally. We don't know what really drove that individual. So once again, it comes back to hearsay. We hear the stories, and it appears on the surface that he wasn't he didn't have humanity's best intentions at heart. But who's to say? I'm not to say. We can look at the social structure. We can look at society as a whole now. Like, is it anything different to what Adolf Hitler really wanted? I don't see it different. So, it depends on how you see it, I suppose.
Is there an aspect of us that keeps us apart from experiencing ourselves?
Yeah, definitely. It's in psychology. It's known as the ego. So it's known as the individual. The individual beliefs, the individual everything that's been learned from the external and the other. So it sort of separates the individual. Well, it molds the individual into the reality, you can say. Now that may only seem as my opinion, but what I know from my own experience in peeling those layers back, then you can experience higher and higher forms of reality, higher and higher states of consciousness. And you've heard it throughout all history that if you get rid of that, not get rid of that personality, but don't have a belief in that personality. That's where we've got to get it straight. A lot of people say that when we talk about the ego or talk about that learned side of our psyche, that we need to throw it in the bin and be a blank sheet of paper. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you start to delve into that realm, into the psychological realm, and starting to analyze your own being, your own consciousness, when you see that, when you're aware that if you're acting out of that place that's learned or is just only believed in, then you start not to act from that place, even though you are still a person in the society. You are still, maybe say, you are still Rita, you are still in America, etc. But there's not that belief in it. There's not that perpetuation. If someone was to come up to you and threaten you with words about, say, your race, your nation, your religion, or your sex, there will not be a reaction because there's not a belief, not a deep-rooted dogmatic belief in that perception. So, in a sense, that's what's kept humanity at a level of stagnation at this moment, is because we have an absolute belief in that we are these personalities for some reason, and we never step out of that realm of believing that. We always believe we're from a country, a race, a nation, and a sex. And all four of them, in truth, are really only false assumptions, especially the nationalism and the religion, because they mold and are shaped over time, and we think and we grab hold of those in a certain instant, and we think that they are eternal, and it's like, well, are they really eternal? Some nations haven't been around for 10 years. They're only young, so there's a whole growth period where there's an indoctrination process. So the ego is almost like it's an energetic block within the being that suppresses the darker side of our nature and suppresses that inbuilt, that natural light that we have within us and how to express it. So all that can shed the ego's skin is higher knowledge of who we are. So higher knowledge of who we are, knowledge leads to light, and light leads to love. I know that sounds new age, but love is knowledge. So that's what sheds that skin. And when one dwells into their own being and understands that, they don't have such a belief in their identity. Even though my name is Jason, I have Way of the Weirdo, etc. There's not something that I will defend the earth or the universe because I have this book or I have this name. There's not a belief in any of that. There's only just opening yourself up to that infinite realm, to that primal energy, and letting that primal energy make use of you, because when you shed that ego, then you truly align with the universal energy. Now, yeah.
Go ahead if you want.
No, I was going to say this is sort of what gets lost into a lot of the New Age doctrines where they say that, you know, we create our own reality. To a sense, we do, but you cannot create your own reality unless you are aligned with that universal energy, because they will only be an ego projection if it's not aligned with the self, and the self is the universal birthright.
I mean, I find it fascinating. You're talking about ego and, you know, fighting for these beliefs, you know, and I the part I find fascinating is this whole concept of my Jesus is better than your Jesus, or, you know, there's Christianity, Judaism, and Islam that all come from the exact same source, basically. Yeah. And it's like, my God's better than your God. I don't even understand that whole thing, because they're all talking about the same God. Like they're three different people.
It can get really nutty when you get into that realm, because when you read all the scriptures, not just the monotheistic scriptures, but when you read like even Hinduism or, you know, all of these other religions, when they speak of God, they speak of it as a single energy, as an energy that is just one. And so, but then when the other religion says the same, they come over and say, we've got the same God, but it's different. So then, you know, you can't even really get into the psychology of that, because it's almost on the state of, I don't even know if there's a word for it, because it's almost idiotic to think in that realm. But they're all explaining the one energy, the one God. That's what they're explaining. They're explaining the consciousness, but they've just cloaked it in all these stories, and they've got caught in the detail of the stories again, and not seeing the total picture of what the scriptures are saying.
Well, and then in a lot of cases, they make it wrong for you to explore what anybody else has to say, you know, and I don't know if there's a fear, you know, and where that came in, that you'll actually discover that they're saying the same thing except with different words.
Yeah. Well, people do not want to get into that. They don't want to, in a sense, accept that all of the religious scriptures are one and the same story. When they get into that realm, they do not want to accept that, because it really, once again, it shatters their own ego. It shatters their own belief in what they thought was real. All of the prayer and all of the meditation on whoever their reference being is, and whoever they believe, whatever they believe God is shattered. So once again, we come back to humanity. We come back to the individual, always looking further out from themselves and looking at themselves and analyzing themselves, and understanding that if they truly understood, if they analyzed their own self, then they would know what they're referring to God is. And again, it's the externalization of religion, and we have evolved past that a long time ago, but we're holding on to that.
In your exploration of like Buddhism and more of the Eastern traditions, isn't there more of a, I'm going to say belief, I'm not quite, you know, tradition of looking inside, as opposed to, you know, where more Western, you know, Christianity, Judaism, Islam are more, you know, looking outside for somebody else to come save you? Yeah,
it's definitely like in the Eastern religions, it's all of them are based on the exploration of their own self and what that means. That's, in a sense, not totally true when you look at Hinduism, because when you look at Hinduism, there are still a lot of people, it's a massive religion, so there's still a lot of people who externalize the gods. There's thousands of gods in Hinduism, but they still externalize the gods, and they don't understand the metaphysical representation of what those gods represent. But still, at the essence of Hinduism is to explore the consciousness and to understand what Brahman is, the absolute, to understand what Shiva is or Krishna. And but in Buddhism's well, in a sense, Buddhism's really not a religion. It's more of a spiritual sort of practice, I suppose. But it's been molded into a religion, you could say, with the cloaks and the monasteries. It looks like a religion to the Western mind. But definitely Buddhism, in a way, is inspiring because it is totally focused on the exploration of consciousness. It's not focused on the outside world at all. It's focused in a sense that it's trying to understand the process of the outside world, but the whole focus of the Buddhist tradition is on consciousness and the processes of within our own psyche. So that's why you have the Four Noble Truths, with that basically are leading you to trying to understand your suffering, your own suffering. That where is your suffering born? Is it born from the natural world and the other, or is it born within your own being? And the truth is that it's born within your own being, because when you understand the Four Noble Truths, it's the desire that leads to the suffering. And you live in the West, Rita, as I live in the West, and you see the modality of the psyche in the West at the moment is basically only desire. It's seeking to gain whatever it is to make the ego stand out over the other in the natural world. So that's the realm that we're in. So in totally many traditions in the East seek to look past that, and even in Taoism, once again, one of my favorite pieces of literature is the Tao Te Ching. Such a simple book, but can open up a vast amount of space within the being. And Taoism isn't actually a religion. It's formed into a religion in China, but Lao Tzu was never intent. He just wrote the Tao Te Ching. That was it. It's just an understanding of the process and that's unfolding in yourself. There's actually an internal built harmony within your own being. When you look past the chaos of the ego, you see that there's an order in your own being in that picture state of consciousness. When you understand that, then you look out into the reflection of the external world, and you can see that as well. You can see that we are concentrating on the chaos in society, but if you were to step back and look at the Earth and the Sun and the Moon and Saturn and Jupiter and all of these planets, there's a beautiful order about the universe. It's not getting caught into the chaos. That's where the Buddhists and, in a sense, some of the Hindu teachings and people who delve into Taoism, that's what they explore. They don't explore the chaos. They explore that there is an inbuilt harmony within all of reality.
I'm looking at the clock, so let's shift gears here, because I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this conspiracy theory stuff, which you put in your book, which I was like reading along, and then it was kind of like, huh? Which I understand why you put it in there, but it was good. So I was like, okay, we're going to talk about it. But you started talking about 9/11, and so why don't we start there? So what's your opinion? Who do you think did it? Do you think it was the, Al-Qaeda that went and flew the planes in? Do you think there was something deeper that happened?
Definitely deeper. Look, the official story of 9/11 is not official. That's all I can say. That's what I can say for the average person that hasn't really delved into 9/11. I think it's naive for us to think that we are sold a story that cavemen hijacked planes with box cutters and took over American Airlines. I don't believe that story at all. There's too many inconsistencies within the story to prove that it is an Al-Qaeda operation. All we have to do is look at Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was actually a database created during the Soviet and Afghani war back in the 80s. And, it actually means the database of the CIA. So they were actually an arm of the Central Intelligence Agency. Anyone can find that out anywhere. You can just Google that up. But it's to say that I know fundamentally and in truth who really did it, I would be lying. But we only have to look at the people who well, you only have to follow the money, you could say. If you follow the money, then you will always usually find out who's the one who benefited from the whole operation. We only have to we could look at someone like Dick Cheney, and we could see that, Halliburton did make a lot of money through Iraq and through the rebuilding of Baghdad. So who's behind Halliburton? I know at that time he was vice president, but he's still part of that operation. But he's, again, a low-key character. So you've really got to delve into who's really pulling the strings in this world. And then we get into realms where we have the they that everyone talks about. We've always had they. Who are they? So within Way of the Weirdo, I addressed some of who they are, as in the magicians. So I'm not saying that they are totally behind 9/11, but they were the ones. They're the ones who continue to reap the benefits from it. And in Way of the Weirdo, I did use a lot of Eric John Phelps's work, who was during those conspiracy parts, and he is the author of Vatican Assassins, and he goes deep into the sacrifice of 9/11, why it was used as a sacrifice, and it's symbolic. Its relationship between the Tower of Babel and that specific epoch of time, that 9/11 epoch. Even it's in the Mayan myths that time was going to bring in a new sort of a gateway, a change. I called it the 9/11 portal in Way of the Weirdo. But so, well, in Eric John Phelps's work, he mentioned that it was the Black Pope at the time, and he's the Jesuit general, and the Jesuit general, they're usually people high in power in CIA, so it was a CIA operation. Now, that's not to say that it still wasn't the hijackers, because they are still working, in a sense, for the CIA. So it gets really grey in that area. So like we said before, Rita, for anyone to sort of say that they have an absolute opinion on it is kind of wrong. But definitely there are aspects of the US government who are involved, the CIA, the military, and the elite powers who run the world. There's elements of all that involved, and there's too much evidence to say that they weren't. So you can look at Cheney, you can look at George W. Bush, you can look at Condoleezza Rice, and you can look at even someone like Larry Silverstein, who was the leaseholder of the towers at the time, and he made a lot of money through the destruction of the towers. So that's not really known to the realm of the realm of the mass populace, but he himself, he was on a PBS documentary saying that when he discussed Building 7, he said that we decided to pull the building, and it's like, what are you talking about? Are you talking about like you wanted to blow it up? There's no real follow up on what he said there, so there's so many grey areas involved with 9/11. But like I said, there's key players that you can look at and you can delve into. Even Rumsfeld, there's footage of Rumsfeld speaking about, we shot down the plane in Pennsylvania, and then he corrects himself, and it's like, wow, like you just let it slip out. So it's up to anyone else. It's up to the individual's research to make their own opinions and see what they think about it. I put particulars in there that can lead to someone to have a little bit of critical thinking on the matter, because even when you get into the realm that, how do 110-story buildings fall at near free fall gravity? Like when you just apply Newton's laws of physics, there's definitely, it doesn't add up. There needs to be alternative energetic instruments that were used that day.
Other than 9/11, is there more going on behind the scenes? Do you think there's more going on behind the scenes than we're being told or being made aware of?
Definitely. There always is. But that's not for us to know.
It's a secret. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. It's a secret. We can't talk about that. But there always is. Like, we can look at you could say that, I was going to say the inevitable banking collapse, but, if the banking collapse has ever happened, it's usually engineered by people who are running the banking structure to keep the population in a state of fear. So there's always these agendas going on. And there's even higher agendas. We have secret societal orders. That's fact. Now, that's not to say that they are demonic in any way. Like, people, in some way, nature itself is a conspiratorial. Now, people won't understand that, but when people understand in their own psyche, they have, in a sense, their own inner secrets, then that's what a conspiracy is. So nature, in a sense, is conspiratorial. So to believe that there is not a global conspiracy going on would be maybe ignorant, in a sense, because it's part of our nature at this point of human consciousness. Not to say it's natural, but it's just part of the nature of the individual at the moment. So when you naturally have people in points of power, elitist power, they have a lot of history and a lot of wealth and a lot of power to hold on to. So to believe that they won't go to all means to keep that is ignorant. So, or looking away. So yeah, there are other agendas going on at the moment. There are other ways to manipulate society. We only have to look at, the fluoridation of water or the genetically modified food. This is sort of not to the betterment of the human organism. So if that's the case, why are we doing it? Because we can grow infinite amounts of organic food and we can have clean drinking water. So it kind of doesn't add up. And then when you follow that realm again, you end up running into people like Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, and it's like, oh my God, like these guys are behind everything. But once again, who's pulling the strings? So yeah, there are infinite sort of realms of agendas going on, and look, they are rising to the surface because the banking structure looks like it's about to collapse, and people are asking questions about, how can this happen? Seriously, how can the United States Federal Reserve, so to speak, owe tens of trillions of dollars to China? How has this all occurred? Is it just bad management? And the answer is no, it's not. It's pre-planned.
Scary.
Yeah.
The question that I am always left with when you start getting into conspiracy theories, especially things like the banking and the GMOs and I don't know, there's a multitude, is what is their goal? What do they want? I mean, I get the power and control part, you know what I mean? But
yeah.
Why? I mean, okay, keep your money, but I don't understand what it is in the big picture of making people scared and making people do these things that they want. It just doesn't make sense to me. Do you have any thoughts on?
Well, I'm with you there. It doesn't make sense to me either, Rita. So, I don't. An ends to a mean. Like, obviously, they want total control. Now, from their perspective, I don't know how they see the world, but it would appear, if they ever got to that stage where we were total plebs and we just had 9-to-5 jobs and never asked questions, it would seem like a really boring world to me, because look at the diversity in the world, the beauty in the world. It's magnificent, and you just have to look into the realm of the arts. You look at musicians or people who make films and all of these beautiful expressions of consciousness. And if we were total plebs, that sort of realm of reality would disappear. It would just be television, like probably reality television too, and a 9-to-5 job, and that would be the existence of a human being. That appears to be what they want. They just want total serfdom, and it doesn't seem like they are ceasing that dream. They want that, what is called the end game, where we have one world government, one world religion, a microchip population that never asks questions, and a one world army, which is already NATO. It's already been built. So they have that sort of dream for themselves. Now, that's not the collective dream, obviously, but look, like you said, it's hard to see why they would want that, because it would just annihilate a whole beautiful aspect of the world. It would just be cast in darkness. It would be, it would be the Orwellian nightmare. It would be 1984. So, again, it comes back to the deep-rooted personality in the individual, where we have the elite born into their families, and they are holding on to their own beliefs for what is good for society, and holding on to their own wealth and their own power, and not sharing it. You can look at some of the greatest people in the world who have shared their wealth. They've got a smile on their face. When you look at the bankers, it seems like they're under a lot of stress. They're trying to hold on to something that I believe is fundamentally dying.
There's the whole conspiracy or whatever about them wanting to eliminate big portions of the population and getting it down to 5 million people or 500,000 people. And I think about, okay, so there are these elitists who have all this money, who are used to, riding around in their $1 million a day yachts and doing all of these things. And I think to myself, okay, now let's just follow this thought through. If they get rid of all the people, then who's going to make the dry cleaning chemicals so that they can get their clothes dry cleaned, and the driver who's going to drive the truck to deliver it to the dry cleaner in the first place? And that's just one little example. It's like what they know as society would collapse, and you would almost have to go back to a feudalistic environment, because there wouldn't be the people who do all of this, stuff to do it anymore.
Well, it seems that the elite lack critical thinking, don't they? There's they didn't think about it so well. Look, I'm not sure. Like a lot of people do believe that yes, they do want to cull 80% of the population. I'm not going to say that's true or false, but it appears that their actions and their motivations lead towards that they do want to cull the population down to around 250 million people. But how is, when you think about that even within yourself, you think, how can that even be achievable with the amount of population we have on the planet at the moment? I think we're bordering on 7 billion, or maybe we've surpassed it. I actually don't believe that the population needs to be reduced. I believe that we can have more. I think 7 billion is okay. I think it's the way what we are being shown at the moment as we are evolving is how to live within an organism with this amount of people on it. How to live sustainable. Can it be achievable? And the answer is yes, it can be achievable. For them who lack critical thinking is no, it's not achievable. So let's cull the population. But, like you said, the dry cleaning business will go down. So they haven't really thought it out too well. I don't know. We can't really tell what they envision for the world in, say, 10 years. But it's probably not in our best interest. So for us, it's probably time to maybe think about, I'm not saying you have to, but maybe think about sustainable solutions, trying to connect more with your community, and just be loving and kind to one another. Be everything that they aren't, and treat each other with compassion and have forgiveness for one another.
That is a great thought. I mean, I think there are so many, just FYI, actually we have 1 minute, so I'm not even going to ask the question. So your book, Way of the Weirdo, I mean, because you're down under, is it available in like U.S. or Canadian markets?
People can get it anywhere via Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's worldwide. It is in bookstores around the world. Probably not in every bookstore, but it's available around the world. And yeah, it's a great read. I've had actually a lot of good responses in the United States, Canada, and especially the UK. So yeah, if anyone wants to contact me via oneworldwithin.com, please do.
See, I never got your webpage, or maybe you were working on it when
I was working
send that to me so I can put it with your material online. Say your webpage again.
oneworldwithin.com.
oneworldwithin.com. Yeah. Anyway, Jason, you're like very cool. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Rita, and yeah, you're very cool as well. So look, it was great. We could talk for a long time, I guess.
Yes, I think so. Well, I think that's the music trying to play in the background. So, Jason, I am going to let you go. And thanks again for coming on the show, and we talk by Facebook or whatever down the road, okay?
Yeah, definitely, Rita. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Bye.
That's Jason. Jason, what's your last name? I just went blank. Jason Gregory, Way of the Weirdo. Next week we have Jeff Balance talking about the world's most haunted places, and Susan Reed talking about living an inspired life. So until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio. Point your browser to www.justenergyradio.com for more show information and to contact Dr. Rita.